even some passages in Deuteronomy that point to these time frames. So that's well over 4,000 years old, 6,000 years old in some cases. So this has been we're heading toward the period of time that just about the entire Bible talks about. I think someone said there's about 3/5 of the Bible is prophecy related. Now, not all of it for the end times, but a good portion of it was for the forthcoming Messiah, our Lord Jesus Christ. But here we are, seal number 2, the red horse. We see that in Revelation 3:4. And we're going to get into Ezekiel 38 war. Funny thing about prophecy is that we can't always pinpoint exactly when it's going to happen. It's more of a thing that once it does happen, you realize, oh, there it is, in some cases. And I think that the Lord does that on purpose for 2 reasons. One, it keeps us excited about looking forward, and we never know what day this all will come to pass. But then also, it keeps us interested in reading our Bibles too, I believe. So what we left off yesterday is the world just went through a catastrophic disappearance of millions of people, i.e. us, and they're in just total turmoil. And probably everyone, there's a lot of controversy over whether or not babies will be actually taken right out of the womb that are ready to be born. I kind of lean that direction. So you can think there's going to be a lot of mothers that aren't saved, going, what happened to my baby? And there's going to be a lot of people just vanished. News reports talking about everyone's looking for answers. So out comes a man who seems to have the answers and starts to build a following. During this period, as we saw during the pandemic recently, I was amazed to watch that it seemed like everyone was on the same tone worldwide, that we need an answer to this pandemic. Well, someday that's going to be an answer to why all of a sudden the world went crazy. And I can see how easily it will be for those that don't understand what the Bible is talking about to not know what just happened. And they're going to be looking for answers. Well, in steps the Antichrist. And he's going to be the man with a plan, as I've heard some prophecy people like to say. So last week we left off with the Antichrist signs the covenant. And we'll just do a quick little review on that. That was Ezekiel 38, 8 and 11, and Daniel 9, 27. We saw that. So after many days they shall be visited in the latter years. I shall come into the land that is brought back from the sword and is gathered out of my people, against the mountains of Israel, which has been always waste, but is brought forth out of the nations, and there shall dwell safely all of them. And thou shalt say, I will go up to the land of unwalled villages. I will go to them that are at rest, that dwell safely, all of them, dwelling without walls and having neither bars nor gates. I'm reading 2 verses here of Ezekiel 38 that kind of shows the status of Israel just prior to this war. And that's why I got really interested in the seals, because I can see that the first seal, almost, I'd say 100% of every prophecy teacher I've ever met believes that is the Antichrist. So he came on the scene, as we saw in Daniel 9:27. I'm just going to read the first sentence, because that's the only part we're at right now. And he shall confirm the covenant for many for 1 week. And from our Daniel study, remember that we talked about this week is actually 7 years. So this Antichrist is going to sign a covenant that basically he's going to promise protection of Israel from forces all over that they will be able to live in peace. They'll probably be rebuilding their temple. It's probably ongoing at this point. And at some point is when I believe that the Ezekiel 38 war is going to happen. And I see it as a way that God is going to allow the Antichrist to fulfill the prophecies going all the way back that even Jesus mentioned of a time frame when they didn't believe Jesus was the Messiah, but they're going to believe another person, and that's going to be the Antichrist. I'm starting to lean, and there's a couple other teachers that I've listened to that kind of are leaning this way too. I used to think differently, that the Ezekiel 38 war could happen And it still could. Again, sometimes with this, the timing, because there's no real timing passage about when. But when I started looking at Ezekiel 38 and then Revelation 6, 3, and 4, and then we were doing the Daniel study of Daniel 11:40. I'm going to get to that in a minute. It all seemed to tie together as the same point in time. And so listening to these other teachers, they're leaning that way too. And unlike some people, Ezekiel 38 and 39, I don't believe necessarily have to happen at the same time. When you look at Ezekiel in general, it's 48 chapters covering a period of well over, basically from 605 BC, when Ezekiel started writing it. And it took a pause at 536 BC, picked back up shortly just to finish off Daniel 9:26, there when Jesus was around in 30 AD. And now it's been kind of in limbo, waiting for the rest to happen. And I kind of see that when we got to 1948, and a little bit in 1918, even the First World War, that the Jewish nation started to regather back in the land. And we see that in Ezekiel 36 and 37. So that period of time has been a long period of time. So why do we take Ezekiel 38 and 39 and cram it into a few days? And so that's what this other teachers were kind of saying, and it made sense to me. So I think that Ezekiel 38 happens here during the second seal. It may be ongoing, and it's kind of I'm starting to see the four horsemen, and that's why I got this particular, let me just move this slide over. I'm leaning away from my notes a little bit, but the four horsemen, the first one again was the Antichrist. Where is this here is called the hypotaphic structure, and it's something that you might even see him in the background there. I copied it with permission from Chuck Missler. This is a chart he liked to use to try to show the structure of Revelation. And right now we're in the seven seal scroll period, and we're at seal number 2. But this is the overall function of the seals, the trumpets, and the bowls. And there's little pauses, as you see here, and let me get my cursor a little bit bigger. As you can see here, you get the seals. And there's a pause here that we're going to talk about, and that's what we talked about last week when we talked about the 2 witnesses and the sealing of the 144,000. Then we get to seal 7, and it actually opens up the 7 trumpets. And that's in chapter 7, verse 8 and 9, I believe is what can't remember off the top of my head. Then during the 7 trumpets, there's a pause between chapters 10 and 14 of, I'm sorry, that's chapter 8 and 9. Chapter 10 and 14, there's another pause, and then with the 7th trumpet opens up the 7 seals. And that's in chapter 15. So that's the real big outline of the book of Revelation. But right now it's going to be a while before we get to that much, but just wanted to kind of show that there. And we're in the seals. And the seals, we started out with the white one in the last week with the conquering, and that's the Antichrist. And now we're going to be talking about the second seal, which is the red horse. Now I'm starting to really believe that, as we know that the Antichrist is, when he started writing here in this first seal, he's going to continue all the way to the end of the tribulation. He doesn't stop writing. And so I kind of see that could be the same thing we could say about all 4 of the horsemen, which are the first 4 seals, that they actually encompass, once they start, they continue. So that even though we're going to be talking about Ezekiel 38, which is a specific war to the area in Israel, that wars in general, I think, are going to be happening all over the planet, including many countries. As people start to rebel against this Antichrist, the different groups of people are going to realize that he's not as he seems and try to fight against him, but that he's going to have power backed by Satan, that allows him to destroy many. And that's where a lot of people are going to die, besides the plagues and the other stuff. So I'm starting to believe that once the wars start, that they'll be ongoing right through the entire tribulation. And so when you look at Ezekiel 38 and 39, I'm starting to see the most of 39 is actually at the end of the tribulation. And when we get to that part of Ezekiel, I'm going to explain how I think it actually happens during the arrival of Jesus Christ at the war that happens when he arrives with us in chapter 19. So that's my basic premise that I'm going with at the moment. So back to where, so this is my basic. So the four horses I can see, like the first one, Antichrist, that once they began, they continue all through the tribulation, where most of the other judgments are short-lived. And I can see that the horsemen as a state of the world during this time frame. When we get into the next two, which is famine and death, that's going to be happening all through the tribulation, I believe, too. There's an interesting passage over in Zechariah 1, 8 through 10, that kind of supports this same idea. And also going to jump to chapter 6 also. I saw by night, and behold, a man riding upon a red horse, and he stood among the myrtle trees that were in the bottom, and behind him were their red horses speckled and white. By the way, I might mention myrtle trees, believe it or not, is a Jewish symbol of marriage. So it almost could see this a little bit as a little bit symbolic of this marriage between their so-called Antichrist and the Jewish nation. I found that kind of an interesting side note there. Then said I, O my Lord, what are these? And the angel that talked with me said unto me, I will show thee what these be. And the men that stood among the myrtle trees answered and said, these are they whom the Lord has sent to walk to and fro through the earth. So seeing that particular verse kind of made me think about the fact that these horses, if Zechariah is talking about the same horses, that they're kind of like, once they start riding, they continue to ride all through the earth. And then jumping down to chapter 6, starting in verse 2, in the first chariot were red horses, in the second chariot black horses. Third chariot were white horses, and the fourth chariot gristled and bay horses. Then I answered and said unto the angel that talked with me, what are these, my Lord? And the angel answered and said unto me, these are the four spirits of the heavens which go forth from standing before the Lord of all the earth. Now that was a definite clue to me that, realize that Jesus is the one allowing these horses to ride. So at first they were standing before the Lord in heaven. So I find that rather interesting tie-in to this, to the Revelation portion of that. So now we're back to talking about the second horse, which is war. And reading our passage for today in Revelation 6, 3, and 4. And when he had opened the second seal, I heard the second beast say, come and see. And there went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another, and there was given unto him a great sword. Let's pick apart this verse a little bit. So I can see that those who have a vendetta, we just left, the world's in turmoil, that we already know that many of the people around Israel hate Israel. Just they're open about it. Iran is constantly talking about how they want to destroy Israel. And even most of the other countries get along sometimes, and sometimes they don't. It goes back and forth. And so I see this they see this as an opportunity to finally fulfill their vendetta to take over and destroy Israel. We can even see as we study Ezekiel 38 that the players even today are those who, for the most part, have either desired to eliminate Israel or want the land area and riches of that area. Besides the access to a warm water port, which I keep hearing Russia talk about. They would love to have a warm water port. And then the Dead Sea is actually, I was doing a little research, it is so chock full of minerals that are necessary for so many different things in medicine and food preparation. And the Dead Sea is actually full of these minerals that the world really needs. And then now, just recently, they found gas off the coast of Israel, and that is a huge thing going on right now. This whole idea of, it's part of the reason Russia has invaded Ukraine, was that I believe that they want not only the land area for growth, and there's a couple other reasons, like Russia is running into a situation where they're running out of population. Their population is actually dropping, and it's partially because their populace is growing older and no one's having children. So there's also a little bit of a hint that that might be part of the reason, is to get basically fresh blood. And then the third reason is that a lot of the gas that is distributed throughout Europe flows through Ukraine. So these are some of the things that that people are talking about in the prophecy circles when it comes to why Russia invaded Ukraine. But we also see in the prophecy world too that these same elements are going to be necessary, and since the finding of that gas, that might be what draws them down into Israel. Russia at the moment don't seem to have any desires for Israel, but that could soon change. And that the fact that we know that prophecy says they will. That and you'll see on the second lesson there, you'll see that map. And if you want to flip it over and take a quick peek at it, these are the countries that are the countries we're going to be talking about in Ezekiel 38 that are going to want to attack Israel. And these are the names used in the Bible. We'll get more into this next week when we get into the actual war itself. If I can start to show you that map real quick. And that, these are the elements that are going to want to attack Israel during this Ezekiel 38 war. And I was going to have you guys, if maybe next week, if you want to try to figure out what countries you think they're talking about there. All these countries are mentioned in Genesis 10. They're called the nations list. It's basically all the sons of Noah. And if you look at where they traveled to, basically through chapter 10 and going away from there, that you can almost tell which country they're talking about. Now this map kind of points to them. Some are real easy to identify right off the bat, like Persia. That's Iran. And then Gomer is actually basically Eastern Europe. And Magog is the Russian. And then Meshach and Tubal is Turkey, Togarmah. Well, actually, I got a slide that actually shows them. This actually shows what they stand for. Libya is Put, and Cush is Ethiopia. And then Turkey has Meshach and Tubal. And Togarmah, it also includes Afghanistan and that general area up there. And then Gomer is always been kind of like Germany and Eastern Europe. So these are the countries that are going to be wanting things that Israel has. There's also a very interesting side note. I was just recently, there's some people investigating this. There's a desire for silver. There's a passage in the Bible that talks about a desire for silver and gold. And interesting enough, there is a famous hunt ongoing that King Nebuchadnezzar, oh, I realized I meant to correct the spelling on that. That's supposed to be Nebuchadnezzar. Never found all the gold or Rome in 70 AD that most believe existed during Solomon's reign. Some believe prior to the final siege of Jerusalem in 586 BC. But this gold and silver, a majority of it was hidden, and may still be somewhere, since most of the people who were in charge in that time frame either died during the sieges or died in captivity, that no one alive was able to know where to look. So continuing on, let's see how this war is going to develop. So going back to verse 3. It says, and when he had opened the second seal, well, the he here is Jesus Christ. Remember we talked about the fact that 2 weeks ago that Jesus was the only one worthy to open the seals of this scroll that was handed to him from God the Father. It's basically the title deed to the earth. Remember we mentioned that it's written on both sides of the parchment paper, and that typically is symbolic of a deed back in the time of Israel's and the use of scrolls in general. So he opened the second seal. I heard a second beast say, "Come and see." So going to verse 4. There went out another horse that was red. And so let's talk about red. Red horse. Believe it or not, it's actually the symbol for red is actually what they call the Soviet Union, the Red Army. And believe it or not, it took a little while to find it, but the reason that started, it goes all the way back to the beginning of this, before the Soviet Union was even the Soviet Union. It was a term used by the working class of that particular period of time when they were fighting against capitalism of the government of that time. And so it was the bloodshed by them during that revolt. And that's how they got to be known as the Red Army. Kind of interesting that the horse color and this war kind of like maybe all ties together, and that might be another clue. There used to be a term Chuck Missler used to use that the Jewish theologians like to call this a remez. When you see something that is of severe interest, it means dig here, kind of like you found a treasure. So dig and see why it's there in the Bible. That they have a basic saying that every single word, letter, and even the spaces between the words all have meaning in the Bible. Then it mentions power. Power was given to him that sat thereupon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another. So let's first talk about the power. And we go over to Revelation 13, 7 through 9. I just realized I didn't got to do the symbol of Satan also. Revelation 12, 3 and 17, 3. Skipped over that part. Finish that first. And they appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his heads. Another tie-in to red. And that stands for Satan. And also in 17:3. So he carried me away in a spirit into the wilderness. I saw a woman sitting upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Again, the color red, and the fact that it's a beast or a dragon is symbolic of Satan. Okay, back to power. Revelation 13, 7 through 9. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. If any man have an ear, let him hear. So again, another tie-in to that who we're talking about here. And again, this particular, what's backing this is definitely Satan, is the one that is, but I also see that when we get into Ezekiel 38 a little bit, another tie-in, that God is not only allowing it, but he's probably actually almost encouraging it in a sense. What I kept thinking about when I was reading it was the fact that, like Nebuchadnezzar did the dirty work of punishing Israel, but God allowed it and actually arranged it in so many different ways that kind of symbolic of the way that God uses world entities to bring his wrath to those who deserve it. There's some that even believe that things like hurricanes and storms and things of that nature are God's wrath when it comes to certain times in history. And it's even mentioned in the Bible, different, we're going to see that in this study, that God uses natural phenomenons to bring his wrath upon. So it's nothing for him to be able to either allow Satan to to put into the minds of these people that they want to attack Israel. But the overall goal is Israel is going to stop it. I mean, that God is going to stop it. But I'm starting to think that the reason God does it, and that's why I'm also hesitant to put chapter 38 and 39 together, is because I don't think the initial phase that God is necessarily looking for it to point to him. He's actually allowing the Antichrist to gain power by making it appear as though the Antichrist is the one who was influential in stopping this attack. And that's why people stop following him. It's just something I've been kind of formulating, is what got this man to get so much power over the entire world? And it had to be some kind of an event that he did that was able to make people look at him and say, oh, he's the one, he's the man, you know. So that's kind of the way I'm leaning in this study a little bit. So you also commented about killing one another. That's an interesting prophecy also. We had a term for this in our military called friendly fire. But basically, that during this invasion, for some reason, either through confusion or maybe smoke or some kind of fog, they're actually going to kill each other. And Ezekiel 38:21 mentions this. Now I'll call for a sword against him throughout all my mountains, saith the Lord God. Every man's sword shall be against his brother. And talking about swords, over in 38:4, it also mentions being given a sword. And I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth and all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. So again, this is God giving a vision to Ezekiel of what's basically going to happen here, and how it ties in so directly, I think, with Revelation 6:3 and 4. So the purpose, and I picked this up in Isaiah 10:5 and 6. God using men to punish, or in this case, get Israel to wake up to who their Messiah is. O Assyrian, the rod of mine anger and the staff in thy hand is mine indignation. I will send him against a hypocritical nation, and against the people of my wrath will I give him charge, to take the spoil and to take the prey, and to tread them down like the mire of the streets. So this is just another prophecy that they are showing this particular period of time and what God is going to be using to formulate. I'm trying to think overall that God's going to allow this Antichrist to look like a Messiah, not only to fulfill the prophecy that Jesus talked about, but also that they're going to see the fake and get and really start following him and really think that that's their Messiah based on what he does. And then when the center point happens, the 3.5-year mark, when he defiles the temple, that Daniel 9:27 talks about, that's when they're going to realize we've been following the wrong guy. And the right guy was the guy back in 32 AD. So now for the Daniel 11:40 through 43. So here's where I see that war will be everywhere, whether it be local uprisings to actual war. But with God's help, Israel will be saved, as we will see in Ezekiel 38. But just like his father Satan, the great deceiver Antichrist will gain worldwide control, as he claims that Israel was saved because of him. And for the Jew that this convinces those in unbelief that the man is the Messiah and follow him without question. And we're going to read a couple of verses here. Let's read through Daniel 11:40 through 43. At the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him. And you can see there from the south, you see those three countries. Like a whirlwind with chariots and with horsemen, with many ships, and he shall enter into the country. And the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind with chariots and with horsemen, with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries and shall overflow and pass over. That last sentence kind of tells me it's not going to, that it may start with Israel, but this is going to be something that continues, enter into countries, not just one. He shall enter also into the glorious land. So that first verse is kind of saying everywhere. In this second verse, I hear in Daniel, glorious land is definitely talking about Israel itself. And many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand. This is a very curious part of this, and that's why most people believe that at the 3.5-year mark, that the place they're going to escape to is basically Petra, which is where they're talking about here, that even Edom and Moab and the chief of the children of Ammon will escape his hand of the Antichrist. He shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and of all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. So that basically it's an indication that the Antichrist is going to start gaining control. And as we look at other verses through this, we're going to see he's going to basically gain control of the entire world and divide it into 10 countries. And that's coming next on the prophetic timeline there that I gave a couple of weeks ago, that the actual dividing of the land into 10 regions that he's going to have control over. But it's funny how this particular area he's not going to have control over. And then over in Daniel 12:10 hints at this also, that those who become saved after the rapture will understand. And so I think that's something I'm even seeing now. When I talk to some atheists and people that they just have no clue about why things are getting weird in this world, that have no concept of the Bible, and you try to explain it to them sometimes, they just seem like they're dumbfounded, like you're speaking a different language. And I kind of see this too, what Daniel was talking about here in this verse. Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly. And none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. So I think that this is probably a good, I hit that stopping point just about right. So rather than jumping into Ezekiel 38 today, I think we'll stop there. Is there any questions on this first part?
Just the truth of it, Dan. I know for you probably well aware of this. For years I heard scholars argue King of the North has always been Syria. Always been Syria. And the other camp would talk about Russia. But it's interesting how those two are coalescing now together to be the King of the North. So
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and I know for a lot of people too used to say that Turkey was the king of the north. And I just think that we'll get into it a little bit when I get into Ezekiel 38, but that one of the things that is mentioned in Ezekiel 38 is the fact that there's a controversy over a word. The King James Bible translates it, let me look at it real quick. The chief prince of Meshach and Tubal. It's in chapter 38, chapter 38, verse 2. That particular word has been tossed around quite a bit. And in some other Bibles, particularly the Revised Bible, it's translated as Rosh. And it's because it's whether or not you decide if it's a title or a proper name. And in a lot of the Greek, the Hebrew experts can see it go either way. So the King James decided to do it as a general location, whereas some of the other, even some of the real old manuscripts will call it Rosh. So you'll hear that term Rosh too, which is...
is head in Hebrew, Rosh. So I don't know if they're talking about a head area or,
Yeah, again, there's a lot of good scholars that go both ways on it. Yeah. So...
it's interesting.
Yes, it is. And it's one of those things that, as we get into this even deeper, I truly, truly believe that in that verse in Daniel 12 that talks about the fact that as we get closer and closer, knowledge gets increased. And I think that's why, even if you look at some of the old teachers of some of these prophecies, they had to go by what they saw. But as we see things developing, and we see what's going on right now in the world, some of this stuff is a little easier to identify. You think back to somebody like turning like 1000 AD, Russia was actually friends with most of Europe and most in and there's even been times that Russia was friends with most of the free world. They didn't turn communist until 1930s, and so that even during World War II, we helped them out a bit because they were fighting against Germany, and now look at them. So people reading the Bible back then were going, Russia couldn't be Russia.
Well said.
So, any other questions? Okay. Let's close with a prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, oh Lord, thank you so much. Exciting times, Lord, to watch some of this unfold, as I'm sure that many have wanted to see some of the things that we're seeing. And we appreciate your help in understanding your word. And we give praise and thanks to you always for all the things you help us with. And may we leave in, remember today that our own independence, and that, Lord, you can help us to see how influential our country has been in helping to spread the word. So I hope that the times will be, Satan is helping me, Lord, with my phone. My son knows that I'm in church this time. I don't know why he's calling. Apologize, Lord. Thank you so much for all that you do and all that you help us with, and that we can continue into the worship service, and it will be a joyful time of worship of you, Lord. And we give you all the praise and thanks. And all the people said, Amen.